Warning: World Weary Podcast occasionally discusses mature themes and uses colorful language.
Welcome to World Weary, a podcast that has been described as listening in on a conversation between a chipmunk and a badger.
Hi.
Recently, we had an editing week, figuring out how to podcast, basically. And part of that, we did a lot of listening through our episodes and recordings. Cassie has been painstakingly editing everything. We've been getting used to hearing our own voices. We've only had a couple of existential crises.
Yeah.
A lot of people hate hearing their own voice.
Yeah, it's weird.
I was one of those people. I think there is some scientific explanation, like your voice sounds different to you. It's like sounds richer and lower. It's frightening in my case.
So you sound creepier to you.
Yeah, I sound even deeper. And then when you hear your voice recorded, you're not used to it. That it's an unfamiliar sound. So that's why you don't like it, because all your friends are used to it. So it's strange to hear this like tinnier version of your own voice. It's like, who is that? But yeah, I used to hate hearing my own voice. Really hated it. But I am learning to accept it now. It's actually, I'm cool with it. But at first, I really was like, oh my God, I sound like a really tired, weary badger who sounds kind of nerdy, but also sounds like they're a heavy user of narcotics. That was the only way I could describe what I sounded like, hearing it kind of
back to yourself.
Back to myself very intensely.
I thought
for a long period of time.
I sound like a deranged woman, but that's okay, because that's kind of what I'm going for, I guess. I'll be that bitch.
Weird women, weird stories. That's what this podcast is all about.
I'm leaning in.
I'm learning to love my voice.
I find your voice very relaxing when I'm editing.
I find it soothing.
To the point where I'm forgetting I'm editing and I miss something that I should edit out, and when you listen to it to make sure I have edited things, you'll be like, excuse me. However, this is not supposed to be in there. I definitely called the Pope something, and we should edit that out.
Yeah. For me, I just worried about how deep and monotone my voice might be.
It's relaxing.
But I actually find it kind of soothing to listen back to, which is probably a good thing.
Is that conceited?
So, each week we pick a different topic, and this week it's my turn to host. I am the master of today's episode. So, today we are going to tackle unsolved deaths. When I was thinking of what to do for this week's episode, I was thinking back to my kind of reference point for all of these extraordinary stories, which are the weird 1970s unsolved mysteries books and like paranormal tales books that we had as kids.
The best.
And if I think back to reading, like unsolved mysteries of the world, I would literally be living for the section on weird, unsolved, freaky deaths. Like human combustion, like spontaneous human combustion.
That was my second choice. Oh my gosh.
So I thought this would be a good episode to drop in here. Things are going to get a bit darker, a bit more sort of painful and sensitive and creepy.
Should we give a trigger warning?
There'll be trigger warnings in there.
Okay.
Don't worry about that. So we thought this would be, a good episode topic, kind of mysterious, unsolved, strange deaths. And also, today's story that I'm going to tell you guys is one of my mum's favourite unsolved mysteries. Since we started this podcast, she's been encouraging me to cover this particular incident, and you'll find out why very shortly. So today I'm going to tell you all about the Dyatlov Pass tragedy. Okay, 1959. We're in the Soviet Union. Igor Dyatlov, he's 23 years old. He's a really talented likable, smart hiker and skier. He's super experienced. And he's also a radio engineering student at the Ural Polytechnical Institute. He forms a group of fellow students, graduates and friends from the university to go on a skiing expedition across the northern Ural Mountains. And the Ural Mountains is like basically a huge mountain range that stretches across part of what is basically Western Russia.
Okay.
So this group is 2 women and 8 men, including Igor. And Igor, he's the leader of the group. You know, he's the kind of the Bear Grylls of the expedition. Yeah, but arguably even better than Bear Grylls. You know, by all accounts, he's not one of those crazy, like, extreme sports kind of personalities, like, you know, live on the edge and push the limits. He's not reckless. He's sensible, he's likable, he's a good guy, he's a good leader. He's exactly the person you'd want in charge of an expedition. So this group, they are all experienced hikers and skiers. They had Category 2 ski tour experience. They were going to do this particular expedition and document it so that they could all get this Category 3 kind of like sports ski tour qualification.
Oh, cool.
Category 3 was the highest you could get in the Soviet Union at the time. It required you to traverse 190 miles, and the route that you took, you know, had to be graded as the most difficult, a Category 3 route. So that's pretty epic. So the goal of their expedition was to reach the mountain Otorten. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. And so this is the thing that really needs to be expressed, I think, at the beginning. This group of people were super experienced skiers and hikers. They were talented sports people. One of the party was studying for like a master's in skiing and mountain hiking. They were instructors. You know, they were pretty near the top of their game. They were not novices.
And they're Russians, so I mean, they've got a head start on being badass, is all I'm going to say.
The snow don't make them, you know, doesn't bother them. They weren't just a bunch of, like, foolish young people, basically.
No.
You know, they were not novices. Me, like, I couldn't have done this.
No.
Like, I'd be like, I'm cold, I'm not athletic, I'm in pain all the time, I'm, like, way too scared. Like, I refuse to go on snow sports holidays. It's been propositioned to me many times.
Morgan really wants
I am
to go.
so not up for skiing into a tree and dying. I don't want to wear the ski suit. The aesthetic is not good. That does not work on my body shape.
What are you talking about? Parachute?
I cannot imagine getting any enjoyment from just hurtling down a cold, painful ramp for hours and hours, getting tired out when I could just be sat in a chair drinking a hot chocolate. And if I got forced onto a ski holiday, that is exactly what I would do.
Well, the thing is, my husband Morgan has been pushing this ski holiday for a long time. Not that we can afford it, but one day we want to do the ski holiday. Under the condition, I'm with you in team jacuzzi and hot cocoa.
Yeah.
We have to have a jacuzzi. We're going to go to the market. We'll go local somewhere to buy some cheeses and baguettes and stuff. And then we're going to take it back to the lodge. And while the gentlemen are risking their lives
all day, so I can forget my fear that my partner is going to ski into a tree while I'm in the jacuzzi drinking hot chocolate all day.
Or that an avalanche is going to come down and burn, or they're going to fall from the ski lift.
It's just not for me.
It's so scary. And when we could just be on... I don't want to do it, Violet.
I'm all for cold countries. I really, really want to go on a proper holiday in, like, the Nordic countries. I want to meet Santa Claus and touch a reindeer and throw a snowball and hug a moomin, hug a tree. But I'm just not up for snow sports. I'd never seen the appeal.
So
people say, oh, you'll do it. You do the instructor bit. It's easy. It's really safe. It's really fun. No, it's just like, for me, I'm already stressed about putting on the weird, ugly ski clothes and the stupid stuff you've got to wear, and you look like an idiot and you're going to fall over. I don't enjoy sliding around, falling over. Anyway.
We're not going to traumatize you with this.
This is why I can never be full on Lara Croft.
Yeah, Because
I've got the highbrow Britishness, the brunette hair, some potential archaeology and anthropology background.
The sizable intelligence.
But I just can't do the physical part. I'm like chubby, kind of lazy Lara Croft that's a bit of a homebody. I'm not about, shooting guns and running around,
For the
jumping.
record, I wasn't laughing at my own joke there. I was laughing at Violet's reaction to my joke. I cannot describe the faces she makes when I make a pun or a joke are worth it, because it's just a face of hurt and disappointment. And it's what I live for. All right, sorry.
So, back to the story.
Yeah.
My point is, this group of people were competent. They were strong, intelligent, tenacious, and a really talented, wonderful group of young people. And that fact makes this story even more tragic, I think. So, I got some pictures here of the group, which I'm going to show Cassie, and we'll make these available to you guys.
Oh, yeah.
We're just looking at...
I have heard this story, but I know how Violet's going to tell it. I'm going to learn all sorts of things I didn't know.
But we're just having a look at pictures of the group before they set out on the expedition.
Oh.
Some nice hats.
Yeah.
Looks pretty cold.
They're all looking like they're having a good time. They're really smiley. This is their element.
There's people who can smile in a lot of snow, in a lot of cold, wearing like several layers of coats. So, this is the group, and again, I'm gonna struggle my way through pronunciation. Igor Dyatlov, he's the leader of the group. He was 23, and he was a fifth-year student at the university doing radio engineering. There was a lady, Ludmila Dubinina. She was 20. She was an engineering economics major.
Smart.
Yuri Doroshenko, he was 21. He was also a radio engineering student. Zinaida Kolmogorova, she was 22. She was a radio engineering major.
Wow, such young college students.
Rustem Slobodin, he was 23. He was a graduate from the university. Nikolai, who was, I can't pronounce his surname. I think it might be French. Thibaut Brignol, 23, a graduate. Yuri Krivonishenko, who was 23, and also a graduate, I think, for construction and hydraulics. Alexander Kolevatov, who was 24, physics major. And then Semyon Zolotaryov, who was a bit older, so the other guys were kind of 21 to 24. He's 38. He was a graduate from an Institute of Physical Education in Minsk, and he was an instructor at a ski base as well. So that's why he was kind of he was a peer and a good asset to this expedition. It's also kind of important to note that this group of people were not known for being subversive types. They weren't rebellious in any way. They were just super sporty, admirable. You know, they could have been like future Olympians.
That's crazy.
They were totally an asset to the country. It's hard to imagine that anyone would want these people to come to harm. So, our group set out on the expedition in January 1959. They travel all the way to a village called Visay, I think. It's the last inhabited settlement they could stay at before starting the actual route. They sleep the night there, they eat some bread, get their energy up and rest, ready for the next day's hike. So 27th of January, they start the hike towards their goal, the mountain of Torten. On the 28th of January, one of the group, so this is the next day after they started the hike, Yuri Yudin, he has to turn back. He's suffering from rheumatism. He's got some health issues.
Oh no.
His pain flares up into that first day and a half of trekking. So, you know, of course, these guys are sensible. At this point, it's safe for him to turn back, head back, and the remaining 9 continue on the planned expedition route. On January 31st, they reach the edge of this kind of highland area. And from that point on, they have to start climbing. And this is snow and mountains.
I can't imagine.
Yeah. So it's like Lord of the Rings kind of situation here. Like,
oh no, the hobbits can't survive.
What they do at this point, at the edge of the highland area, they've got to start climbing. They store some food and supplies and equipment here at a kind of base camp in the sheltered wooded valley, because from this point on they can only carry the essentials. So they leave behind things like, a musical instrument, and they leave food and equipment for the return journey back. So they know that they have these supplies waiting.
Yeah, so they can do sort of like a supply point.
The next day, February 1st, they start to traverse through a pass in the mountain range. Once they had cleared this pass, their plan was to make camp on the other side. However, the weather takes a turn for the worse. There's a really bad snowstorm. They lose a lot of visibility, they lose their direction a bit, and they accidentally end up climbing quite a fair way up Kolatsiakl, a mountain which is also known as the Dead Mountain, or the Mountain of the Dead, in the language of the local indigenous people called the Mansi. And they call it the Dead Mountain, partly because there's nothing up there. It doesn't really support any wildlife or animals, so it's a very desolate and lifeless place, but also, reportedly, because it did already have a reputation for deaths. Like groups of travellers or, people going missing there, people had been known to die there.
That's not good.
Definitely not good. So our party have climbed up a fair bit of the slope of this dead mountain, and it's real snowy, and that's when they realise the mistake they've made. They've, what's the word? Diverged from their course. They've diverged from their course.
I am a psychic. I'm a psychic, and I know what you mean.
They decide to stop at this point, and they're going to set up camp there on the side of the mountain. They could have travelled about 1 mile back down the slope and camped in this sheltered forest area, but it's kind of speculated that the group probably didn't want to lose the altitude they'd gained, because, when you're climbing up that high, I guess, you've climbed pretty high up on the mountain. Climbing a mile must be kind of hard, like when you're going up.
Very difficult.
So, you'd have to do that again if you went all the way down to camp. And also maybe they'd have wanted to practice camping on a mountain slope too. So they make their camp on the side of the Dead Mountain. It seems they had some dinner that evening, and they were settling in and preparing to rest for the night. And after that, it appears something went horribly and terribly wrong, or something awful happened.
My stomach turns every time.
So everything we know about what happened to the expedition party, from the point that Yuri Yudin left, so like on the second day of the journey,
bastard.
Everything else we know, we've pieced together from evidence that was found in the pass following this incident. So like the cameras, diary. So before they'd set out on this expedition, it was agreed that Dyatlov would send a telegram as soon as they returned to the village of Visay, which was like their starting point or like base. And this telegram was expected to be about February 12th. But Yuri Yudin, the guy who had to turn back on that first day, he had been told by Dyatlov that the trek was probably going to take a bit longer, and, they kind of started out a bit late, and this wasn't really a biggie. It was common to have to add a few days, onto the estimated expedition time. After a few more days pass, however, people are becoming concerned. The families of the expedition party are concerned, and they demand a rescue operation take place. So on February 20th, the head of the institute from the university, send in a first rescue search group comprised of volunteers, mainly teachers and students from the university.
Oh, yeah?
And the rescue party heads out on the expedition route. By February 26th, they find the group's tent abandoned on the side of the Dead Mountain.
Ugh.
There's a picture of the tent.
It's so scary.
Yeah.
So
it's all like collapsed and...
It's just, yeah.
So they say the tent was half torn down and covered with snow. It was empty, and all the group's belongings and shoes had been left behind. The tent had been cut open from the inside.
That's the one that gets me. What the fuck?
And a trail of footprints showed that some of the skiers had exited the tent in just their socks or even bare feet. So these conditions, it's so cold and snowy, things have to be bad for you to go out with no shoes on. The temperature would have been very low, around minus 25 to 30 degrees
in
Celsius. So that's minus
Crazy.
13 to minus 22 Fahrenheit.
Sure. I don't know.
With a storm blowing, so that's really, really
Wind
cold.
chill as well.
You'd almost be better off naked with snow boots on than being kind of dressed with no shoes.
Oh, wow.
Because your feet are just going to, like, immediately freeze.
Yeah.
The other weird thing is that most of the footprints didn't seem to show panic or running, apparently. They were people walking at a normal pace, exiting the tent, and apparently not against their own will, you know. So that's super weird. But, like, they're kind of calm,
That's insane.
walking footsteps. The search party follow the footprints to the edge of a forested area, I think down the slope, and underneath a big cedar tree, they find the remains of a small campfire and 2 bodies in a shallow layer of snow. So if you don't want to listen to graphic descriptions of corpses and autopsy reports, you're going to want to skip this part.
Yeah.
They find Yuri Krivoshenko and Yuri Doroshenko. They are only partially dressed, like in their underwear and socks. They'd made a small campfire to try and keep warm, but it appeared that they'd, succumbed to hypothermia. Flesh on their hands was mashed, and loads of tree branches in the cedar tree above them were broken, and forensic tests found these guys' flesh embedded in the bark.
Wow.
Suggesting they had, like, frantically scrambled up at the tree, perhaps trying to see something or locate the tent, or they're trying to get away from something. It also appeared that their bodies might have been moved or shifted after they had died, either naturally or moved by someone or something, from these kind of marks or, like, kind of staining you get on the skin. So the next day, the search party then find the bodies of Igor and Zinaida, and about a week after that, they then find Rustem's body. So they found 5 bodies.
Gosh.
They're found in various locations between this forested area and the tent, and the poses that these 3 were found in suggest they were actually trying to get back to the tent. Although Rustem had a small fracture on his skull, it didn't kill him, or it wouldn't have been a fatal injury.
Right.
So it seems these 3 appeared to have died from hypothermia, but it was still kind of odd that he had this fracture on his skull. It took another 2 months to find the other 4 bodies.
Wow.
So you got to remember, this is, like, super snowy,
secluded,
difficult place to get to. It's like you're basically
isolated.
Climbing. They were finally found in this snowy ravine, which was deeper into the forested area, downslope, from where the cedar tree was and the tent. They were better dressed than the others, so it seemed they'd actually taken clothes from some of the others. So, maybe the other guys had died, and the surviving lot used their clothes to try and keep warm. On examining bodies found in the ravine, body of Nikolay was found to have had major skull damage, and Lyudmila and Semyon had major chest fractures.
Wow.
Apparently, the force required to cause such damage was compared to, like, the force of a car crash.
God.
Notably, most of the bodies didn't seem to have external wounds, but it was more like as if they had been, like, internally crippled by a high level of pressure.
Wow.
They did find serious external injuries on Lyudmila. She was found to be missing her tongue and eyes. She had all kinds of horrible injuries. She had macerated hands, possibly from, like, gnawing on them when they went numb. In one account, I think they reported that there was evidence that she had, like, blood in her stomach, so that she maybe had suffered these injuries before she died. Some of her external injuries have been explained as the result of water, like maybe a small stream of water was like running past her body or where her body was lying, and that might have caused some of those external injuries, so like, you know, your eyes and tongue or whatever.
And animals might go for soft
exactly,
bits.
Animals. So there's some crazy injuries going on here. Some really weird,
it's a lot of force.
Really weird injuries. So there's evidence that this group that were found in the ravine, they were trying their best to survive because they'd managed to dig out a den in the snow and lay branches down on it.
Okay, so trying to insulate.
To keep themselves warm. And what's really weird is that apparently their bodies were actually found a few feet from this improvised shelter in the deep part of the ravine. So it's like, were they moved, or like, did they get out of their shelter, or you'd think if you made the effort to make a snow den with like branches, you'd stay there, and you might die on that, but
yeah, weird.
After testing, some of the hikers' clothing was found to be radioactive, at least I think on one member of the party. Also, some of the clothes taken from the two bodies underneath the cedar tree were placed on the cedar branches, but obviously hadn't been used by anyone, so they were just like hung in the tree. An investigation into these deaths was obviously opened very quickly, and the investigation concluded that an unknown compelling force, or a compelling natural force, had caused the deaths. So 6 of the group members died of hypothermia, and 3 seem to have died from fatal injuries. There was initial speculation that the indigenous Mansi people had attacked and murdered the group for, you know, being on their territory. But, of course, only the hikers' footprints were visible. There was no sign of a hand-to-hand struggle. The physical injuries on the bodies don't equate to human-to-human physical violence, basically. And the Mansi people were known to be peaceful. You know, there was no track evidence of anyone approaching the tent.
This is silly.
You can rule it out immediately. So the investigation kind of ruled that there were no indications of other people nearby on this dead mountain apart from the 9 travellers in our expedition party. They ruled that the tent had been ripped open from the inside.
That's the scary part for me, is why?
The victims had died 6 to 8 hours after their last meal. Traces from the camp showed that all group members left the campsite of their own accord on foot. So there's no sort of marks of someone being dragged against their will through the snow or anything. High levels of radiation were found on only one of the victims' clothing. The fatal injuries of the 3 bodies, so the 3 that had injuries,
the internal injuries and weird stuff,
that they would have definitely died from injuries rather than just hypothermia.
Gosh.
Those injuries could not have been caused by another human being because the force of the blows had been too strong and no soft tissue had been damaged. And the official closing statement for the case at the time, given by the Junior Counselor of Justice and Criminal Prosecutor, Lev Ivanov, he said the deaths of the expedition members were due to a series of mistakes by Dyatlov, the leader. So they said that Dyatlov made mistakes about
where they should camp,
where they should go, and they diverted from the route. They made bad decisions considering the low temperatures, etc. That it was their mistake, essentially, that they, you know, got themselves in a bad weather situation and a dangerous place to camp.
That doesn't explain the injuries, though.
He said that considering the absence of external injuries to the bodies or signs of a fight, the presence of all the valuables of the group, so this wasn't anyone trying to like rob them, and also taking into account the conclusion of the medical examinations for the causes of the death of the hikers, it is concluded that the cause of their demise was overwhelming force which the hikers were not able to overcome.
Like an avalanche.
Something like that.
Yeah.
An unknown.
UFO.
The inquest officially ceased in May 1959, so that's literally a few months after they'd finished finding the bodies.
Gosh.
As a result of the absence of a guilty party. The files were sent to a secret archive. Sounds spooky, but I'm actually pretty sure that people have been able to gain access to that archive like years later, so it's not such a cover-up kind of thing.
But still suspicious.
Yeah. And the mountain pass where the expedition group die is named Dyatlov Pass, after Igor Dyatlov, the leader of the group. So, why the frick would this bunch of experienced hikers and skiers cut themselves out of their tent from the inside, not properly dressed for the harsh weather conditions outside, and leave the tent at night?
I've heard theories, I think I read somewhere, correct me if I'm wrong, that there were some strange noises that were recorded, not even just over there, but like that the locals had been hearing weird things. I think it was like, I've heard that it was a government testing area and they were unaware. I heard maybe it was an avalanche or they heard the starting rumblings of an avalanche. Somebody went outside to check and then started screaming, and then they cut themselves out and tried to get somewhere as fast as possible and forgot their clothes, and then maybe tried to dress the ones that were looking like they could survive, and all these theories. Nothing makes sense to me. I heard the UFO theory where like alien, that's why there's radiation, because one of them gets like abducted and then they all go searching for them and try and get away because there's a UFO above them or something. I don't know.
Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Our other question that we need to consider is the fact that although it's clear that some of them seem to have died from hypothermia because they're not sufficiently dressed to withstand the super duper cold snow outside,
that's
what's up with the serious injuries found on some of the bodies?
Yeah.
These super weird internal injuries. What's going on? So we've kind of got the thing that the investigations into this case have shown that it's really unlikely that these guys were harmed by other people or wildlife. There's no evidence of person-to-person combat. You'd expect more prints and physical evidence if they'd been attacked by people or by wild animals. So, avalanche.
Number one.
They hear the telltale noises of the avalanche. They panic. They cut themselves out of the tent, run for the trees. They get lost. They got split up. They're cold. And they eventually get into trouble and die. However, the site of the incident where they, when they discovered the tent and the bodies, there was no obvious sign of an avalanche having happened. The layers of snow over the bodies were, not particularly deep. They're fairly shallow, not what you'd expect if an avalanche had passed through. The telltale signs of an avalanche having occurred, certain patterns of debris, no one noticed that. In addition, the location, especially at the time of year that, Dyatlov's party went out there, doesn't really have the right conditions to have avalanches, apparently. And, there have been lots of other expeditions there. No one's experienced an avalanche. And also, this group, they were super experienced skiers and hikers. Dyatlov was really experienced. Alexander, who was studying for a master's in skiing and mountain hiking, there's like a tour instructor with them. They wouldn't have camped somewhere that would have likely had an avalanche hit it. These guys, would have been able to see this is a bad place to camp. You want to stay out of the way of this area. This area has avalanche potential.
Yeah, you know what they're doing. It's not you and me trekking up a mountain for the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what they live for. They're trying to get level 3.
These people weren't stupid. They weren't novices. They were very competent at this. However, the avalanche theory is one of the most popular theories behind the Dyatlov incident. And in 2015, the investigative committee of the Russian Federation reinvestigated the case and stated that a natural avalanche or a snowslide, some kind of, natural snow disaster, had caused the party to escape and leave the tent. These investigators confirmed that the weather on the night of the tragedy was really harsh, with snowstorm and temperature falling below minus 40 degrees centigrade, which wasn't really considered apparently by the 1959 investigators. They arrived at the scene of the accident a week later.
Cold is cold.
The weather had improved, and apparently, they might not have noticed the remains of a snowslide that had settled down and been covered with fresh snowfall.
We are dealing with, knowledge of then and volunteer rescue party originally making notes.
Yeah. And it's not like they had the monitoring systems we have now where we can kind of, you could probably like Google Earth it to see if somewhere's had a massive avalanche or there's like monitoring stations and stuff. They didn't have that then, so they wouldn't know what the weather might have been like on the mountain a week before. Another theory is that this was some kind of there was some kind of mania. So maybe one of the party had like a manic or a psychotic episode all of a sudden. Some have also tried to explain their strange behavior and lack of clothing with...
That's what I don't get. They just leave calmly.
Yeah, it's so weird.
In various states of dress.
And like calmly
the girls
leave.
didn't have one of the girls was found with more clothes, wasn't she? Like they were trying to put clothes on her to keep her alive, or she had grabbed clothes. But the other girl was like completely, pretty much naked, wasn't she? Scary.
So some people have tried to explain their weird behavior and the fact they didn't have much clothing on, but saying that they'd already got some kind of level of hypothermia.
Yeah, like in the tent.
So you can be, maybe in the tent, like you get irrational. It's like being irrational is like an early sign of hypothermia. And as a victim approaches death, they may perceive themselves to be overheating. Therefore, you might take your clothes off. Or maybe, there was a violent dispute in the tent, but it seems unlikely. They weren't drinking. The only alcohol that they brought with them was like medicinal cleaning alcohol.
And why wouldn't they just open the tent?
Exactly. That is, that's such a panic thing to do. Like, cut yourselves out of the tent and get out.
Why were they panicking and then calmly walking away? That doesn't make any sense to me. It makes me want to cry because it's just like so weird. Let's cut ourselves out and then walk in a sort of uniform way up to this place. And then some of them were trying to get back to the tent. They just all go up to this weird. Maybe they were in a dream state. I don't know.
Another theory is infrasound. So this hypothesis is really bigged up in, there's a book called Dead Mountain. It came out in 2013 by Donnie Aker, I don't know. Iker, maybe. It's called Dead Mountain. And this hypothesis about infrasound is that basically wind going around the dead mountain created this thing called a Kármán vortex street, which is basically a weird swirling flow of air, which can produce infrasound capable of inducing panic attacks in humans. So according to this theory, the infrasound generated by the wind as it passed over the top of a mountain causes a kind of physical discomfort and like mental panic and distress in people, so that it could have passed over the mountain and made them all kind of freak out, made them feel like insane dread and doom and panic, basically.
Yeah, maybe thinking there's going to be an avalanche. Let's get out of the tent real quick. By the time we start walking up to deal with this, we realize nothing's wrong, and then we're hypothermic.
Exactly.
And now we can't find our way back, so
That's literally what the author of The Dead Mountain theorizes, that because of their panic, they're driven to leave the tent by whatever means necessary. They flee down the slope, and by the time they're further down the mountain, they would have been out of the path of the infrasound, and they would have regained their composure. But because it's dark, it's night, they could have gotten lost or split up, and they wouldn't have been able to find their tent. And
because they're such good friends, they're like, we gotta find these people, and so they're wandering around, getting slowly more
freaking
and more
out.
hypothermic.
And the traumatic injuries that a few of the victims, I think the ones found in the ravine, had, were the result of them stumbling over the edge of the ravine in the darkness and landing on the rocks at the bottom. So it basically creates a panic. They flee, they get lost, they're not dressed for the outdoors.
They all stumble and one guy hits his head.
They all
one just hits her chest.
Yeah, and the rest get hypothermia. Another theory is military testing.
This is my favorite.
This theory is that Soviet parachute mine exercises were happening on or near the expedition path. So maybe our party of hikers, they're woken by these loud explosions, they flee the tent, with not the proper attire and no shoes. They're shell-shocked and kind of panicked and find themselves unable to get back to the tent. Some members would have froze to death trying to deal with what was going on with this bombardment of mines. Others would have taken the clothing, but only to be injured by concussions from these mines exploding. So what's crazy about this theory is that there are actual records of parachute mines being tested by the Soviet military in that area around the time the hikers were there.
Oh no.
Parachute mines detonate while still in the air rather than, upon striking the surface of the planet.
So you wouldn't have much evidence there.
And they produce signature injuries similar to those experienced by the hikers. Heavy internal damage with comparably less external trauma. So you just get crippled from the inside out.
Gosh.
Another weird thing is that on the camera, or one of the cameras that was found, there is at least one weird photograph towards the end showing some kind of light orb in the sky. And that kind of goes well with the parachute mine theory. There were kind of reports and sightings of glowing orange orbs floating or falling in the sky within the general vicinity of the hikers, which could have been military aircraft or even the mines themselves. This theory kind of states that scavenging animals then might have gone and made the external injuries on some of the victims, but it would explain the weird internal injuries. Another theory along the same lines is that the military may have been testing some radioactive stuff in the Ural Mountains, maybe weaponry. This is partly based on the fact that they did find some radiation on some of the clothing on one of the bodies, and also because some of the bodies were described by relatives at the funerals as having orange tan skin and grey hair, maybe as a result of exposure to some kind of strong radiation.
Creepy.
However, the argument against that is that radioactive dispersal should have affected everyone and gotten all of the equipment on everyone's clothes instead of just one person. And the skin and hair discoloration is more likely to be part of a natural process of mummification in the snow and all the exposure to cold and wind. Some people are pretty suspicious that the military or the government at the time had something to do with this and were maybe trying to cover it up because, initially the files and the investigation of the case by the Soviet authorities was kept secret. However, at the time, concealing information regarding domestic incidents was standard procedure.
Yeah.
So, in the USSR anyway. So it wasn't out of the ordinary to put it in a secret archive. It seems unlikely that there was a really big cover-up. So that kind of goes against the idea that, the military was somehow involved. And, by the late 1980s, apparently all of the Dyatlov files had been released in some manner. People had access to them. So they weren't, super secret forever. But here are some creepy pictures of these kind of weird light
on his camera.
Orbs on one of the cameras, yeah.
Oh, that's weird.
How creepy is that?
It's weird. It's just a light, and then what's at the bottom there? Is that just
I don't know. It's like a tree or something, maybe. It's very hard to tell.
Gosh.
Creepy though.
Very.
And so those kind of orb stuff also links into to some extraterrestrial theories or UFO theories.
Of course.
We're not really going down there today, but you can find a lot of that.
We were just there last week, I think. So.
You can find lots more about that on the interwebs.
Mm-hmm.
So our final theory that we'll explore is Yeti.
Yeti!
So a television documentary that investigated the Dyatlov Pass incident in 2014 interviewed two members of a search party, or of the search party who'd got to the scene first. And they claim that they saw footprints larger than those of a human in the vicinity of the tent, and that those footprints were never included in an official Soviet government report. They also stated that these inconsistencies and discrepancies in the original investigation, are part of some kind of Soviet military cover-up to conceal the fact, possibly, that killer Yetis with superhuman strength are living out in the Ural Mountains.
Okay. Well, I mean, I like it. Let's go there.
So one of these cameras, or maybe they only had one camera, I'm not sure, which they were basically using to document their expedition so they could get their Category 3 qualification. You know, they needed proof. Recording the expedition was sort of part of that. There's a photo on it apparently from the trip with what appears to be a large humanoid creature in it, which some have interpreted as a yeti, although it's debatable. Maybe, these guys were fun, young, exciting people. Maybe it was a bit of a hoax. Maybe it was something imaginative. Maybe we're just misinterpreting a picture of, a regular man. Who knows? But here's the picture.
Oh, what is it? Oh, I mean, it could be just one of them messing around, but that looks really furry. How are they going to carry a fursuit that big? It's almost gray rather than black. What is this on his camera?
Yeah.
That's insane.
So I'll leave you with that thought. Maybe it was a yeti. In February 2019, CNN announced that Russian authorities are going to reopen the investigation, although they're only going to be exploring 3 possible explanations. There's an avalanche, a snow slab avalanche, or a hurricane.
This is ridiculous. You can't start an investigation when you say we already know what it is and we're only going to investigate so we can prove that it is that. That's the exact opposite thing you're supposed to do with science. Am I crazy? That basically proves that it's something else. That it wasn't an avalanche. If they're that desperate to make sure for once and for all in the internet generation that it's written off as an avalanche. That is the dodgiest shit I've ever heard.
They have completely discounted the possibility of it even being a crime.
That's ridiculous.
I mean, okay, so one of the things that I think is so haunting and disturbing about the Dyatlov Pass incident is the weird injuries that were found on the bodies, or some of the bodies, and like the odd conditions that some of the bodies are found in. And it's already a very compelling story because you have the tragedy of the loss of life of these talented young people. So it's almost extra horrifying to deal with the very freaky circumstances of their deaths and the weird theories
really horrible
that we have to, consider. So what's your verdict, Cassie, on the Dyatlov Pass incident?
I kind of think it's the Yeti now. Well, here's the thing. There's the scrambling up the tree to try and get away from the Yeti. But this is the Yeti's forest, man. Okay, there's the fact that their bodies were slightly away from that shelter they built. That's weird. Maybe they were all together and they got split up because the Yeti ran after some of them, gave them that fracture and those injuries. Then the Yeti went to go get the other ones, like he's going to save these people for a meal. When those people are injured, but they somehow circumvent and get the clothes, as many clothes as they can, and try to get back to the tent. It explains maybe they heard Yeti growling, and that's why they ripped out of the tent. Maybe the Yeti was around the tent, was about to go to the front of it, and they're like, rather than just sit terrified in a tent when he's going to slash you or something. Oh God, I think it's a Yeti. That picture's scary. I don't think these kids would have it looks like fur. It looks like fur.
You have to see the picture. It's pretty
haunting.
Pretty creepy. I think for me, although I can understand some kind of weird snow slide happening, because I don't know enough about avalanches and the way that all works. Maybe there are kind of weird, sneaky, underneath snow slide kind of stuff that can happen. But I would have thought that this group of people would have managed an avalanche situation better, and the placement of the bodies and the injuries that some of them have. A lot of people think that doesn't fit with an avalanche.
It's weird.
I really wouldn't be surprised if this incident was caused by military tests, like the parachute mine exercises. It would explain some of the injuries or why they seem to have acted so oddly. If weird bombs were going off, it would create confusion, I think, and stun you a bit. So you would, you can't think properly sometimes when you have a panic like that.
These are college students. They aren't military. They're not trained to deal with shell shock. And
what if it made you temporarily blind or something?
Oh my gosh.
being stunned by like big noises
Even
and
in
weird
the tent.
internal injuries. Yeah, and you're like all blinded trying to get out of the tent, and you can't see your clothes, or
Yeah, and everyone's panicking.
it's not good. I mean, the other thing that where my imagination goes when I think about the story is what it must have been like for the rescue party, that first rescue party that goes out there.
Terrible.
You have to follow the trail that these people set. You know, that took them a few days to get up to the dead mountain. So you'd have seen their stash with their, you know, food and all the things for the return journey. You're wondering if they're still alive somewhere on this trail all the way to this mountain. You have to go on a category 3 rated route to save people who were already talented fucking skiers and hikers. And you go there, and you, on the side of the dead mountain, you find this scene and these bodies strewn around in the snow with horrible injuries. Everyone has died. It's the most insane situation. I could never. You've got to be the bravest person to be in any kind of rescue search party. It's like when they send the police diving in like ponds looking for bodies. I could not get my head around how you can cope with that. And
working 9 to 5.
It's insane. So just we'll spare a thought for people that.
Yeah, good job. We really appreciate, because some of us could never. They know it. They know they're.
It's epic. It really is epic.
They're heroes. My story. We are in Strasbourg. Nowadays, this is eastern France on the Franco-Germanic border. It lies 2.5 miles or 4 kilometers west of the Rhine River on this sort of border. And we're in 1518. So back in time.
Medieval days.
Ooh. And it's only a few short decades after the Black Plague swept through Europe and killed loads of people. So people are still sort of traumatized by that. Your grandparents have told you the stories of the plague. You're the survivors of that.
Yeah.
And there's lots of famine. There's lots of, because people weren't hygienic, there's lots of nastiness is what we'll put it. And so that creates, people are shitting in the streets. I mean, I can't stress enough that it is some of your nightmare. Somebody listening to this is like, no, but that's what it was like daily, on the daily. Everyone's suffering. Here we go. It's summer of 1518, and a woman whose name was given as Frau, which is Mrs. of course, Trophia or Trophy. I kind of like how Trophy sounds, which means it's going to be wrong, but that's how I'm pronouncing it. Let's go. One day, she stepped into the cobbled street out front her semi-timbered home and just began dancing. She's grooving.
Okay.
She just steps outside, begins grooving. Oh, it's really cute for a couple minutes. Isn't that nice? Like, having a little
Look
jig.
at that lady doing a little jig.
Ooh, lovely. A couple minutes later passes. Then an hour passes, then a couple hours pass, and her husband is watching, and a couple passerbys maybe, you know, giggling and walking on with their daily lives, because it's only been happening for the afternoon. Husband starts begging her to stop. She cannot stop. She keeps dancing. Hours and hours and hours. Nightfall arrives, and she falls over in exhaustion. She can't dance anymore. Her legs are sore, her feet are bruised and bleeding. Definitely got some calluses and bunions going on. And this might have been the end of it, because obviously her husband took her back inside, put her to bed. Maybe she's going to be all right tomorrow. Maybe she's just had an episode. Life's hard. However, the next morning, on swollen, bleeding feet, Mrs. Trophy, without any thought to food or drink, once again returned to the streets as soon as she woke up and began dancing. She continued again this day to dance until exhaustion. And this continued for days. So by the third day of this, her husband's obviously gone nuts, and people were gathering. All sorts, every walk of life. You know, your pauper, your beggar, your gawker, your medicine people, I don't know. All sorts of people.
The whole village.
It's the one thing they don't have Netflix. They don't have Instagram. They don't have worldwearypodcast.com, wink. They don't have any of these things. This is the most interesting thing that's happened in a while. So by the 6th day, so on the 3rd day, they're watching this, you know, all these people, but 6 days go by and local authorities are getting nervous. The local council's like, I don't know what to do. People are walking away from their jobs to watch this shit. They took her by force on the 6th day, or 5th, depending on what you read, what chronicle. Still dancing, they grab her, and she's dancing while being dragged into a wagon, and they transport her 30 miles away to a town called Severn, which has this shrine to a Saint Vitus, who is a dancer. And they reckon because Saint Vitus was martyred, and he might have cursed her with the dancing fever, and he's the saint of dancing. He's also the saint nowadays, modern times. He's the saint of comedians, entertainers, actors, musicians. He's our kind of saint. However, back then he's more specifically associated with dance. So they think she's been cursed because of his martyrdom. Maybe she's a sinner. Everyone's done something wrong, especially back then. So they got to take her to this shrine and cure her. So they take her to the shrine and sort her out. We're going to use holy water, oils, and stuff. She's gone. Great. You think that'd be the end of it? Unfortunately, she had gathered quite the fan base, and already 30 or so people had begun copying her, and they had begun to dance in the cobbled street. Violet's face right now is terrified and horrified. They're just dancing until exhaustion.
Street party.
Gives a new meaning till, like, dance, dance, dance till you're dead. Alright. All these people are taking to the streets, dancing, displaying their disturbing dances until they exhaust themselves daily. Do the same thing until they completely exhaust themselves. They're not eating. Some people are dying. That's why it's getting serious. This is giving local authorities a lot of anxiety. As you can imagine, things are not going the way a normal town proceeds. People are just dancing and not doing anything. So the local council seeks clergy advice first. And
as you did.
As you do. It's demons and curses, according to the clergy. Saint Vitus is cursing people with dancing fever for their sins, or they're being demonically possessed, and demons are getting a hold of them and displaying these dances to be offensive to Christianity or Catholicism, to God in general, by displaying these weird dances. Basically, the town council didn't find a lot of help with that, so it's not helping their problem to know that they're being cursed. It's not helping the immediate issue to be told they're being cursed.
What would you do with people? Like, did they just try, like, grabbing them and, like, restraining them while they're dancing and handcuffing them and stuff?
Well, that's what they did with Mrs. Frau Truffaut.
Okay.
That's what they've done with her. They've taken her physically by force in a wagon to Severn, and now they've got 30 people in this.
And they get
this is day
strapped
6,
down.
day 7, and the local authorities are right now trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
So they next go to physicians. They're like, okay, let's get the doctors of the day, the best doctors we've got in the city on this, you know.
We've been in nightclub situations and music festival situations where I have seen people that I am concerned have danced too much. And you try and say, you know, do you want to sit down? Here's some water. These people must have been next level. Next level.
And it's not a time when, I will say this, in Strasbourg especially, I will talk more about St. Vitus and the rituals around him later, but dancing is important to their culture. It's not something seen negatively. That's important to this, because dancing is very much part of their culture. They like dancing. It's something, especially anywhere around that Rhine River area.
That was pretty much all the fun you had back then.
Exactly.
Was like doing a bit of a jig, someone getting their instrument out.
It's very much artistic culture. There were poems at the time that I'm going to read out to you, because there were so many artists and it's flourishing in that sense. Because of course everything's shit, so you got to make your own fun.
You don't see people dancing out in the streets enough in Britain. We're very reserved.
You see it in America, block parties, shout out, yeah, what's up, Marilyn? So the physicians all agreed that people were probably suffering from overheated blood and they needed to be bled. But the problem is, because they're dancing and flailing about, it's kind of going to turn into a horror scene if they try and bleed people like that.
God, I love the logic of this time period. If it's the answers are it's either the devil and magic and God. You take a step down. What do? We need to bleed people, stick leeches on them, cut
Scientists
them
of
open.
the day, what is your idea? We gotta bleed them, get all that overheated bad blood out. So it's just like, that's fine, but they cannot do this. There's too many of them, and they're dancing too feverishly. Imagine trying to bleed someone. It's just going to look like you're murdering them. They can't do it.
Because I imagine even if you restrain these people down, they're going to be like shaking around, trying to dance.
Yeah.
Even if they're strapped down to a board.
It comes down to this. What's the next best method of treatment? Can you guess the treatment? What would you recommend?
Knocking them out unconscious with a big stick.
Okay. I like it. And then when they wake up and start dancing?
I would have just done that so that I could bleed them.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
And what,
Get the hot blood out. But I'm thinking on their level right now. I know we need to bleed them. I know we need to cut them and get the bad blood out.
But can they get away with that without, like, other people who aren't dancing yet? Because it's a big city. It's only 30 or so people dancing right now. It's just about 30 of the fans that were watching. It's a huge city, So there's quite a few people, like hundreds, maybe 1,000 people or so, a few thousand maximum, I think. And so 30 people are dancing, and they can't really bleed them without other public people going, what the fuck are you doing? You're bleeding these people uncontrolled. That's what I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I'm guessing they can't get away with it.
Yeah, you wouldn't be popular for knocking them unconscious and then cutting them open.
So what do you think they're going to prescribe? Best guess, best medicine at the time. What
Holy water.
Holy water? Well, the doctors have actually decided they're going to prescribe more dancing. What? So yeah, one quote is from the physicians of Chronicle at the time. They must dance themselves free of it.
Oh, wow.
Your face.
What do they bring in, like...
Okay, here.
A load of people like, get the liar.
Everyone was ordered to do some crazy ass shit to make this party happen. They set up platforms in the horse market. They got all the tanners and carpenters to build stages for dancing.
This reminds me of when I was at university in Wales, in a weird little town with no train station. It's a very strange, cute university. There's some interesting characters go to that university, and in our first year, in the freshers week,
oh yeah,
one of the most rad things that happened was a very happening dude who's just starting to learn about being an adult, and he was learning about being a hippie in freshers week. Probably had his first smoke, his first drink, first trilby.
Woo,
he did the crazy thing. This is how crazy things got. That he climbed onto the roof of his building and played the lute by moonlight. That was the craziest thing that anyone did.
Wow, they did.
That was the kind of university I went to.
My friends in high school were doing car surfing on cocaine, setting up cones outside of my house so I couldn't leave hundreds of cones from the local Catholic school outside my house so I couldn't get out of my driveway in the morning. But you go have fun with your lute.
You're playing your lute at night. The rebel.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so they set up these platforms. It's in your face. They're like, dance time, bitch. Get out of your cobbled doorstep. We're going to take it one step further. We're ordering you to dance in the market, in the green market. So it's an event. They hire a bunch of musicians to come play with the coolest instruments of the time, including pipes, fiddles, and horns.
Introducing the electric lute.
Alright, they also made sure to have some sexy, young, healthy dancers to get the party swinging and encourage everyone to continue to dance, to give them moral support and to get the party really started. So, great idea, am I right? How do you feel about this idea, just from your perspective? I just want to get an idea.
I'm really not sure. I think there's some very zany people in charge of this town. They're really, this is very holistic, and they're trying to work with everyone and just be happy, and
maybe some hippies
prescribing more dancing. I don't know. I kind of like it. It's kind of more fun and rainbowy than the bloodletting and the Jesus stuff.
I'm glad that the physicians were like taking a step. I'm like, let's lean into it.
Let's try some aromatherapy.
Maybe it'll break up the whole, maybe they think it's psychosomatic, but they don't have the word for it then. Maybe they're like, oh, we'll let them dance it out. Let them do what they want for a few days. Maybe they'll just dance it out, get it out of their system, and go back home and realize that
maybe they'll just get tucked out, you know?
They'll have their dance party. We'll make it an event. We'll make it socially acceptable. And then we'll all go home, and then we'll go back to normal. Yeah, so it stupidly backfires. Within a month, according to the Imlin Family Chronicle, the dancing plague had taken hold of over 400 people now. So from 30 to 400 within a month. The council does a 180 and suddenly demands that if people dance, they have to do it out of sight. They destroy the stages that they got these people to build. They get rid of those musicians, get rid of the dancers. They banned all music and dance until September. So this was in July. It's now August. They're like, no dancing for a month at all into a society that is intrinsical to their life. It's very something that is part of their life. One exception. This is a quote directly from that shit that went down. If honorable persons wish to dance at weddings or celebrations of first mass in their houses, they may do so using stringed instruments, but they are on their conscience not to use tambourines and drums.
Tambourines.
Not the drums! Because that's when your foot goes a-tapping.
Oh, so it's percussion getting these people into this crazy state.
Yeah, that's what they reckon. Oh, and anyone super afflicted, sorry, forgot to mention, anyone super afflicted were then bundled into a bunch of wagons and taken up to that St. Vitus shrine. So about 400 people are bundled up, thrown into wagons while dancing. Just imagine how crazy that wagon's moving. Like, oh my gosh. So they bundle up 400 people, take them to the shrine, and they made them wear red shoes. So they sewed, them some red shoes, I guess, to hide the fact that they had bloody feet. Oof. That's my guess. And then they put crosses in their hands and sprinkle them in holy water, oil, crosses on them. They do a crazy ritual. They get shit tons of incense in. They make a huge ritual. You know how in any religion there's a certain amount of what I call pageantry. And that's what they do. They create the whole atmosphere. They do everything in their religious power that they know at the time to try and, quote unquote, cure them of the dancing. And they make them walk around in the graveyard outside this shrine and just walk around. Like, they confine them in there dancing.
Wow.
To try and stop the spread. So they create this atmosphere of thick belief, and pretty soon, people stopped dancing. But a lot of people dropped. Like, a lot of people died from this as well. So, one 17th century chronicle by the Strasbourg jurist Johann Schilter, I almost pronounced that Schittler, I don't know why, Schilter, quotes a now lost manuscript poem. Many hundreds in Strasbourg began to dance and hop, women and men, in the public market, in alleys and streets, day and night, and many of them ate nothing, until at last the sickness left them. This affliction was called the St. Vitus dance. Another chronicle from 1636, so about 100-ish years later, relates a less happy ending. In the year 1518 AD, there occurred among men a remarkable and terrible disease called St. Vitus's dance, in which men in their madness began to dance day and night until finally they fell down unconscious and succumbed to death. So they're recognizing that there's muddled history. They're saying that the church saved the day, but the fact is a lot of people died.
Yeah.
Like, death. They danced themselves to death.
So what I want to know is, what are the medical possibilities behind it? Like,
yeah, we're getting into it.
Get me into that. That's
first,
where I want to go.
I know you want to go there, but I'm going to first take you to other outbreaks, because this isn't the first time.
Ooh. Ooh.
So more than 10 dancing mania, that's what they're called, contagions, had broken out along the Rhine and Moselle River since 1374. Incidents often broke out around the time of the Feast of St. Vitus.
Is it in the water?
We're going to get there. I know you're just dying for the theories part. In the late Middle Ages, people in Germany and countries such as Latvia celebrated the Feast of Vitus by dancing before his statue. This dancing became popular, and the name St. Vitus dance was given to the neurological disorder sydenham scoria. It also led to Vitus being considered the patron saint of dancers and of entertainers in general. The earliest known outbreak of dancing mania occurred in the 7th century.
Ooh.
And it reappeared loads over Europe until about the 17th century, when it stopped abruptly. On June 24th, 1374, Aachen, Germany, was part of the Holy Roman Empire at the time. The city was suddenly overcome by people breaking out into arbitrary dance routines, but not just any dance routines. This is taken from an article, The Dancing Pilgrims at Mühlbeek, from a Journal of the History of Medicine and Allied Sciences. At Aix-la-Chapelle in 1374, men, women, and children joined hands and danced together in the street for hours. The dancers shrieked, chanted, saw visions, called upon both God and demons, and finally fell down, complaining of severe abdominal pain and bloating. Stupor and sleep often supervened. The mania spread to Cologne, northwest Germany, Flanders, the southern Rhine provinces, and Trier. While this was the largest epidemic of dancing frenzy, sporadic outbursts continued throughout the next 200 years. A lot of people died from this thing. It's not fluffy. People started to dance, and it wasn't... We'll get there. Okay, I gotta stop. So here's the theories part. First, we're going to start with ergot. The theory is that ergot is that stuff that grows on that nasty-ass wheat.
Okay. Like mold stuff.
Yeah, that damp rye, found on damp rye, mind-altering mold, which can cause twitching, jerking, hallucinations, and a condition known as St. Anthony's fire.
Okay.
However, the historian John Waller has debunked this hypothesis in his book on the dancing plague, A Time to Dance, A Time to Die, 2009.
What a great title.
Yeah. Ergot can cause convulsions and hallucinations, yes, but it also restricts blood flow to the extremities.
Ooh.
So people poisoned by it would not be able to dance on those extremities at all.
Oh, okay.
So that's out.
That's out.
Right away. Demonic possession / overheated blood, which is their original theory from that time period. The church at the time suggested it was these things, and in the end, the church claimed to have resolved this issue in one incident with the St. Vitus shrine. Very sort of not really, because they all died.
Everyone else died.
They died.
Yeah.
Most of them died.
Yeah.
A few people
a lot of them died.
Yeah. But how many of them just stopped and went into a coma or something?
Exactly.
And is the church really not going to want to have that one? They secret them away in wagons and take them to a church and go, it's all right, they're fine. You know? There's also a theory acting out due to oppression or poverty at the time. Mass psychogenic illness, MPI, also called mass sociogenic illness or mass psychogenic disorder. A more archaic term, epic hysteria or mass hysteria. Those are archaic terms that we don't...
So like mass craziness.
Yeah. The rapid spread of illness signs and symptoms affecting members of a cohesive group or originating from a nervous system disturbance involving excitation, loss, alteration of function, whereby physical complaints that are exhibited unconsciously have no corresponding organic ideology or origin, or like there's nothing to explain it.
Yeah.
So, psychogenic disorder. Such outbreaks take place under circumstances of extreme stress and take form based on local fears. In the case of the dancing plague of 1518, they cited a series of famines and the presence of smallpox and a lot of syphilis was crazy in Europe at this time. Stress factors affecting the city of Strasbourg in particular at this time period that can be cited through chronicles at the time. And he further maintained that there was a local belief that those who failed to propitiate St. Vitus, patron saint of epileptics and dancers, would be cursed by being forced to dance. So their belief systems and their sort of superstitions causing this hysteria every European dancing plague between 1374 and 1518. They've all occurred near Strasbourg along the western edge of the Holy Roman Empire. And then there were the prevailing conditions. In 1518, a string of bad harvests, political instability, arrival of syphilis, basically created this horrible bubble of anguish. Even by, those standards of the day. Yeah. They were getting rammed, basically, with all this nastiness.
And this lot were like, so close to the plague. It was like...
And the suffering manifested as hysterical dancing because the citizens believed it could. That's a theory, that one. But there's also, it's just this idea that basically this crazy guy went back 8 years after the plague occurred to find out what happened. And they found the originator was this woman that, Mrs. Truffet. And it's always interesting to me that it was a woman that started this one. If you think about how rough times were, in my opinion, might be a little rougher on a lady as well. And there's all these outbreaks tend to be, they think they're acting out. But to me, it's disconcerting that it catches. Yeah. And people are dancing to exhaustion. Yeah. I'm not so sure psychosomatic stuff, it would be fun for a little while, but I don't know how that works. That's scary to me. The fact that, someone in the streets of our town could start dancing and then people join them for a laugh or whatever and then can't stop. Yeah. Or they join them because they can't not join them. Why did she suddenly start dancing? And it wasn't the first time. There had been other dancing plagues. The Black Plague hit before. Maybe it was like a fungus. You know how that fungus makes those ants climb those trees and stuff? That's what I think maybe.
The zombie.
Like a sort of zombie fungus that was around at the time. Maybe the conditions were right, and I don't know.
For me, it's like
I just don't think it's psychosomatic.
Yeah. Like, if it was psychosomatic, that would really scare me.
That's the scariest because you lose control.
I'd rather it was something like a weird bacteria or a weird virus that got into these people, or they were tripping out on something, or there was something in the water that, made you want to dance and move around and not stop moving.
Because we haven't explored the brain, even an nth, really. They've done a lot of great work science, but we don't really understand the brain completely. So if it's something untangible that catches, that's scary. I don't want to be dancing till I die.
No.
No one would want that.
I have felt serious exhaustion in psytrance festival dancing situations. I know what it's like to be tired from 6 hours of dancing. I can't imagine doing it for days and days and days.
Not stopping for drink. You don't care about sustaining
not
your life.
Eating, not drinking,
that sounds
no rest.
To me like some kind of weird virus. I would hope it's a virus, and that around that time, because we haven't had a major, huge plague in a while, have we? On that mass scale. And it was such a time period of those things happening. Maybe it was just a weird plague that sort of died out. Maybe people, because it stopped at the 17th century, maybe people up their game as far as certain things, and so it died out, or maybe their belief systems were changed. I still think that throughout that century, people are superstitious even today with religion, and there's a lot of religious people in the world. Where it's only nowadays we're coming into this, it's okay not to be crazy into it. You can be an open atheist in a lot of places now. My brother was beat up in community college in a philosophy course for saying he was an atheist. That was only 10 years ago, really. So that doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't add up to me that it's just that people are superstitious and bad times were happening, and then it just stops at the 17th century. It's just weird to me. I don't know enough about history to be able to the 17th century then blossomed into this and that. I don't know enough about it. That was a slightly better time to be alive, I guess. So maybe people are maybe it was a particularly rough time and people are just going nuts because they'd rather dance to death than live out their entire lives syphilitic.
Freaky hysteria, kind of.
And to prescribe more dancing.
Oh, the dancing plague.
That's the thing. It freaks me out. Yeah. Because it could return. Plagues can make a comeback.
Who knows what needs to just, get into the water supply to make people do weird, have a zombie party.
Gosh. Creatures come and go, and maybe something on that kind of level might have thrived in a certain environment, but wasn't a strong enough species to continue and died over time. Didn't travel enough. Maybe something goes, like up your nose and sort of makes you dance. But yeah, I guess there's no purpose until they die. Maybe if it's not like they're going to check the corpses for fungus, I guess, or whatever.
Not back then. It'd be fascinating if it happened again and you'd be able to find out.
That would scare the shit out of me.
I wouldn't
and
wish
think
that
about
on anyone.
Okay, let's say tomorrow a dancing plague starts. With social media, it'd be like Bird Box or whatever, where you couldn't look at the TV because you might see the dancing.
It's an episode of Black Mirror, probably.
Oh my gosh.
It becomes like a viral video at first, just like this like slightly crazy guy dancing all crazy in the street.
And then they exhaust themselves. And
people are like, whoa, check this dude move. And then it's like, whoa, it's like more people dancing. And then it becomes a zombie movie.
So like Forrest Gump running. I just kept running, but dancing. And they're exhausting themselves to death. That's what's scary, is because people started dying and people were still dancing. Did you see microcosms of this when, like, kind of don't want to bring it up, but like that girl and her friends with the Slender Man stuff? You see microcosms of a bit of how influenceable we are.
Yeah.
That's what's scary. And crowd thinking and how quickly we can sort of just get into a weird mesh.
Hive mind.
Oh, yeah. That's what scares me, is loss of individuality in a situation that's hyper tense or stressful. Oh, that's scary. But yeah, that's the story of the dancing plague. Have sweet dreams.
Boogie.
Boogie. Dance till you're dead.
Well done. If you've made it to the end of today's rather dark and morbid and creepy episode, you can get in touch with us by writing to our email address, worldwearypodcast@gmail.com.
That's right.
Has anything creepy ever happened to you on a camping trip? Maybe you were awoken by a strange howling noise as you slept in a tent in the forest. Maybe you found strange, gigantic footprints in the snow. Feel free to send any stories about weird or crazy or frightening stuff that you've experienced. You can email that to us. Rate, review, and subscribe. You can find episodes, information, and all our social media stuff on our website. That's www.worldwearypodcast.com. There you'll be able to find out about the various places that you can listen to us. And until next time, goodbye.
Bye.